Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Jack Graham and John Peterson with another We Talk Photo podcast, which is always also can be seen on YouTube. For those of you who are listening, you flip over to YouTube, it'll be there, and you can see that moon over John's head.
Yeah.
And mountains in back of me. And
the
with
moon
us
over
today,
the moon.
yeah, it matches. And with us today is, John, we're so lucky to have, in the last few podcasts, some really great people. And today we're with David duChemin from the Vancouver area. We'll get David to tell us exactly where he is. Maybe he doesn't. David, thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a real pleasure. Thank you both.
Do you want to tell everybody where you are, or maybe you want to not?
Yeah, no, I'm in a beautiful little town called Nanus Bay, just about halfway up Vancouver Island. I am due west of Vancouver City by about a 20-minute float plane ride.
Oh, wonderful.
A float plane. So can you drive there, or do you have to fly there?
No, Vancouver Island's a pretty big island. There are ferries that you can take your car across.
Good for you. Good for you. Living in a great area, it's really conducive, I think, to a healthy life. I grew up in and around New York City, and man, if I ever go back there again, it's going to be too soon. But so, some of these little places have great names, like where you live. I think it's really conducive to being creative, and that's kind of what we want to talk about, I think, today.
Sure.
For those of us who don't know David, we'll get David to do a really short little bio. I'll make it really quick. He writes great books, and folks, just buy them all. I don't know how many books you have. I have 4 or 5 of them, and I've read them. And
you got about a third of them then.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, beyond that, he takes great photographs.
Yeah, well,
he's more than just a writer.
Yeah, that's true. But you know what? If you have the ability to write, it's also a great way to share your knowledge, which David is as good as it gets in that. David, maybe the cliff note, little bio.
Yeah, I've been photographing for over 35 years. Picked up a camera when I was 14 and never looked back. I had a brief career, 12 years as a comedian, and but always photographing. And then one day just decided it was time to get more serious about my photography, and switched gears dramatically and became a humanitarian photographer, and was photographing for international organizations in places like Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Haiti, often sort of in the aftermath of atrocities and that sort of thing. And so I did that for many years, always with the intention that I would contribute something back to the world, but also wanting to teach, because photography has always been the medium that made sense to me. And so I have also been very intentionally a teacher. I didn't do it because that was, they say those that don't teach. And I just love the teaching. It's not something that I do because that's where the money is. Though happily, it also is, and primarily now. So I had an accident 12 years ago in which I shattered both my feet. That took me away from the humanitarian photography.
That was in Italy, if I remember right, correct?
That's right. That was in Italy, and so now mostly because I don't know if I'm getting fed up with people or I just need a break, but and COVID played a big part in it. My photography has drifted significantly toward adventures rather than rough and tumble places. Photographing humanity, I'm now photographing wildlife. And focusing on big things: sharks, whales, bears, and lions, and apex predators, that sort of thing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And my day-to-day creative life is split pretty evenly between making photographs and writing. Though these days, when I'm not getting out, it's more in the writing.
Well, you've recently had a major life change.
Significant. Yeah. Yeah. You
Yes,
could say that.
and when people look at you here and see how healthy you look and how you smile and your attitude, why don't you tell people, you know, what went on here, and let them know that, man, nothing's the end of the world. Correct.
Nothing is not, you know what we, as Nietzsche says, what doesn't kill us gives us something to blog about. And I think that's what he said. I might be getting it wrong, but it gives us, it gives us a story, and we are so resilient. We make it through everything until the thing that we don't make it through, and then we're not around to worry about it. So so I mentioned the 12-year the accident I had 12 years ago. I guess it's going on 13. And I shattered both my feet, and one of the feet recovered really well, and the other foot did not do as well. And I had some revision surgeries, and the arthritis kind of set in, and eventually my surgeon said, well, this is kind of, so I said, this is, it was like, I felt like I was returning it to Costco. I was like, this doesn't work anymore. I want a different one. And she said, this is as good as it gets for you for now. And I've never been good at settling. So I said, well, are there more dramatic alternatives? And so I started researching prostheses and artificial legs, feet, that sort of thing, and eventually said, you know what, I'd like you to take it off. So June, what is it now? It's July 10. On June 5th, I went in for surgery and had the foot removed. I've learned that amputation is a big, scary word to people. There's no easy way to ease people into the conversation. But in fact, my FedEx lady came to the door with a set of crutches and said, "Oh, I hope nobody needs these." And without thinking, I just said, "Well, I'm going in to have my foot amputated." And her eyes filled up with tears. And I had to go to my wife later and be like, "You know what? I think I broke our FedEx lady." And that was when I learned I need to approach this topic a little more graciously or gracefully. And so anyway, I had the amputation surgery on June 5th. And 4 days later, they sent me home, kicked me out the door and said, go home, heal up. And on July 5th, I was fitted for my first prosthetic leg and foot. And it's a bit of a learning curve. I got to tell you, it is not for the faint of heart. I'm still on crutches and will be for a while. It's the phantom pain that they talk about with amputation is, I'm here to tell you, it is a very real thing. Very surreal. It's incredibly specific. So right now I feel like I've got someone sticking me with a knife in my big toe. Like I know exactly where it is. Most often there's it feels like an electric, like someone's tasing my foot. But you look down and you're like, well, it's there is no foot. It's the day after the surgery. I remember having this persistent itch on the bottom of a foot that I no longer had. Very distracting, very surreal. Really not, it's not all in your head. It's in your mind. I equate it to your brain. My brain is making phone calls to my foot, and my foot's not answering. And so it's just leaving this increasingly hostile series of text messages or, voice messages. But it's fading. It's fading once I got my prosthetic foot. I think my brain started to kind of make a little bit more sense of it.
Yeah, it'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, for most people it does. And also for most people, every now and then, I'll be sitting and I'll be talking and I'll get a real zinger, and I feel like I've got Tourette's or something. I just all of a sudden this is not gonna be well for when I'm public speaking and stuff. But I've got time set aside and I will figure this out. And eventually, I asked my surgeon before she did it. I said, if it were you, what choice, and she said, yeah, if it was this and there were a couple alternatives, she said, I would have the foot amputated. She said, with a good prosthesis, you can be more active than you've been in years. So I'll be hiking and running and, doing my thing in no time. It'll take a little bit of time
You've already
to
got
get
things
there.
scheduled for next year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I've got things scheduled for September, but I figure if I have to, I'll use my crutches, and I've got friends that are perfectly willing to piggyback me if I need to. So
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
What an
You know,
attitude.
it's I mean, life deals you cards, right? And this one is a card that I kind of chose based on, some of the other cards I've been dealt. But everyone's got something. Everyone's got something that can either be a channel for their creativity, or an excuse or a reason just to give up and go sit on the couch. And I don't know, life seems pretty short, and there seems to be a lot of really interesting things still to do. So I choose, the alternative to the couch, whatever. And that's harder. It's harder to kind of push through the mental stuff. But that's what making photographs is, right? I mean, we have so many constraints. We have all kinds of things that aren't working. The light's not working. We didn't bring the right lens. Oh my God, I forgot the intervalometer or whatever. You can use that as an excuse, or you can go, okay, but what can I do? And yeah, it's a mindset. I don't like to think of it as positive thinking, because that makes it sound, like it's just a choice. So yeah, I think, attitude's everything. You can choose to be happy, or you can choose, and choose to be creative and choose to rise to the challenge, or you can choose to mope. But I'm not gonna learn to walk again by not walking, or by moping and sitting around and hoping it gets better. I'm gonna walk again with small wins and putting my leg on and going out and giving it a try and falling down occasionally.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation before we started recording this program, when you were touching on, we all miss something. We're all missing something, and how we approach that is whether we'll be successful or not, and whether you work around whatever it is we think we're missing. But, in many cases, what we think we're missing or what we think we're lacking, we don't really need.
No, we don't
really
at all. And everyone talks about creativity and about, like, you got to think outside the box. And I'm like, no, creativity is what you do with the box. We've all got a box, and this idea that the sky is the limit. And the sky is never the limit. You're going to hit limits way before you get to the sky. You got to look at the box that you're given and go, okay, here's like. Creativity needs challenge. It needs friction. It needs a problem to solve. And, we're not just talking about the arts. We're not just talking about painting and poetry and photography. We're talking about engineering and science, and how you raise your family, and, deal with your ornery teenager. Those are creative challenges, right? And how you rise to them, what you do with them. If you can learn to see from a different perspective, right? When I think about photography, it's almost like the perfect model for life. The skills that make you a good photographer are the skills that make you, I think, good at life. Give you a rewarding, creative life. You need to be able to look from different angles. You need to be able to, peer around corners. You need to be curious. All the things that make you a good photographer can also make you good at life. And so I could talk for hours about creativity and stuff, because I think that's it. That creativity and gratitude, if you can figure those two things out, you've got it made.
You bet. You bet. And folks that are listening and watching, please visit David's website. His latest blog post has to deal with this topic, specifically about creativity, kind of the missing ingredient. And, David, when I read that this morning, the thing that really resonated with me is we often think about creativity solely related to the arts. But what you explain in your post is, and you touched on just real briefly, is creativity has so much more to do with other things than the arts. It's problem solving. It's looking at the world around you and looking at your box in new and unique ways to either A, solve a problem, or B, advance whatever it is you're wanting to do. So it's perspective and problem solving and ways of seeing the world around you. And that applies to everything in all of our lives. I mean, you know, as you said, raising kids, making a family, getting gas in the car, you know, and there's a big line. How do you go about solving not impediments, but just different situations?
Yeah, well, it's, you know, the word I always come back to is constraints. We all have constraints, and it can be in photography or anything else. There's always going to be something. And the problem is some people approach it like the constraints are a bad thing, like, oh, I don't have, you know, a piece of gear, or I don't have the latest. Well, you can continue to add those things. You can buy all the camera bags and fill them up with all the gear. You're still not getting to the point where you're thinking differently. You're still not getting to the point where you're, I mean, you have all the tools, you've added them all, but the reality is constraints are important. Otherwise, you're paralyzed by choice. I went to Italy once on a workshop that I was teaching, and a guy showed up, and I kid you not, he had every focal length from fisheye to I think to 500. He had a 500, one of those older mirrored telephoto lenses, and his I couldn't pick up his camera bag. It was insane. I was like, are you expecting to see a bear in Venice? Like, what? He had everything, and as a result, he was so paralyzed by all of the choices. I had one camera and one lens. I don't have to work through that. I'm not busy asking what lens should I use. I'm asking what can I do with what I've got. It's very freeing. I mean, it's extremely liberating. Never mind the fact that, you know, I didn't have to carry a heavy backpack. So I think it's important that people realize that constraints are not the problem. Constraints are not a barrier to creativity. Constraints are necessary for creativity. They're the thing that pushes it forward, and always have been.
We're all spoiled with, I mean, the gear is crazy. You know, I mean, I don't know if I remember right, zoom lenses didn't even get really good till mid 90s. And I think you were around a little bit before that. And
Sure.
we used to carry, you know, 3 or 4 prawns with us, and that was it.
Yeah, and
we
you know,
made do with it, you know.
we did, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my gear. I'm not a gear freak, and I don't care what brand you use. Good gear creates new possibilities, 100%. There are things that I can now do. I shoot with Sony Alpha 1s and a bag of lenses, and the things that this camera can do, they create possibilities that I didn't have before. But it still requires a creative mind to think, okay, now what can I do? I've got this tool, I've got these possibilities. What can I do with it? And without that focus on, look, I've been writing, everyone else seems to be writing about gear and all that sort of thing. It's great because it always changes, so you always got something to write about. I just want to write about how photographers think. Like, that's it. And my publisher keeps going like, what's the new book about? I'm like, dude, it's about the same thing all my books are about, how photographers think. And I'm just trying to find a new way to bring people to the trough and get them some, you know, some water. Because the gear conversation at a certain point, it's like, oh, great, you got all these possibilities. Now, what are you going to do with them? You know, how are you going to find your voice as a photographer? What are you going to say? Or earlier, we talked about, you know, kind of comparing the gear to a microphone. Everyone wants to try out all these new microphones. Like, that's easy. Anyone can buy the best microphone in the world. It's still possible that you have nothing interesting to say with that microphone.
Yeah. What do you do? And I get this question a lot, especially, you know, for people who, unlike, you know, us, and have real lives and families, and have commitments and 9-to-5 jobs, and maybe they get out once a month to shoot. And I find that they put a lot of stress on themselves because they have to go out and, you know, make 10 good photographs that day. And if I don't, I only get one day. You know, how do you deal with the days? And I think I know the answer, but I want everybody to hear. How do you deal with the days when you may not be as ultra creative as you'd like to be? It's just not happening. Because
That's
are those
that's
days.
every day, man. You know
Yeah,
what, we put such pressure on ourselves to
exactly.
produce and to perform, and the first job of the photographer. So for the first thing I want to say is, in that case, time is one of your constraints, and that's unfortunate because
Final commitment.
time is one of our raw materials. You need more time. So stop paying so much attention to social, stop watching TV, reorganize your calendar. That itself is a creative act. Figure out how to reclaim your time, because photographers need three things. We need light, space, and time, and probably a camera, to record the thing. But so that's the first thing I would say, is that you absolutely need your time. The second is that the job of the photographer is not to use the camera. The job of the photographer is to have interesting insights into what they see, interesting perceptions, to go out into the world and just watch, not just look. Because a lot of photographers, they're looking so frantically, just
Mhm.
anything. I just need something. Give me a squirrel. I need anything to focus on, and then I'll fix it all in post. Instead of just like going out and I get it, because I'm there. I'm not judging others. I'm saying this is the
Yeah.
person
I
I
think
see in
we've all
myself.
been there. Yeah.
Of course we have, because we do love to press that shutter button. My God. But the first job is to slow down and go, okay, what am I seeing? Like, that's why I come back to curiosity. If you want more interesting perceptions about the world, you've got to be interested in the world. You've got to go out and see what it is. The problem with photography, especially the popular photography movement industry, whatever, is that the thing that people are interested in is their camera. And I don't know how you make photographs about your camera, except these camera porn sites. You got to have something beyond the camera to be interested in. Singers aren't interested in the microphone. They're interested in the bigger themes, love and betrayal, and whatever nonsense that they sing about. We need something that we are interested in. And so that's what you do with that sliver of time that you have. You go and don't screw around with the things you're not interested in. You go and find that thing and give yourself over to it. Whether it's, I mean, I like bears and big things. Some people like macros and flowers, and some people want to do portraits. Find a way to do only that. But if you've only got a day a month, then you, even more than me, have to really focus on what you want to do and make the time and be happy with one beautiful photograph that lights you up
Yeah.
inside.
Or be happy you had a nice day.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I think adding to that, David, I think part of what I heard, or it's a little bit of my own filter because it's something I believe in, is really being present in your surroundings to see stuff that's going on. And with that, you have to be present with yourself. What am I feeling? How am I responding and reacting to what I'm seeing? Because there's times when I
Yeah.
go out and let's say I have pressure on myself, I'm going out to shoot streams and creeks, and I get out there and I just don't feel it. It's like, okay, I could turn around and go home, or I could sit there for a while and look around and go, is there anything that is giving me energy? And I have to be really perceptive of myself and observant of the world around me. And you know what? I might end up spending 2 hours shooting macros because somehow there was some energy that was given to me at that point. And it's all about being, as you said, slowing down, but being perceptive and connected to the world around you and to yourself, what you're feeling, how you're reacting.
There's something really important in that. And I can't tell you how many photographers I see will show up and within 5 minutes, it's very clear that they've assessed the scene and they're like, there's nothing here. And I am very suspicious of my first instincts, because it's not just that we show up at a certain place and we kind of look around and go, okay, well, I've seen it all. Oh, no, you haven't. You need to sit your ass down and you need to watch, because it's not just the place. And I often talk about it's the intersection between light, space, and time. When you sit in a place, you haven't seen it. You haven't seen what it's going to look like in 5 minutes, and you haven't seen what it's going to look like in 5 minutes through a lens of the person that has sat there for 5 minutes, who's seen different things. When you sit on a street corner for an hour, the way you perceive that street corner at the end of the hour and what you see as possibilities, way different than what you saw at the beginning. And you've got a million different moments that have come through that place. The light has changed. The number of intersections between light, space, and time that happen when you sit for longer, and your own kind of all that internal noise, right? You get there and you're like, oh, nothing's giving me energy, and but you sit and you watch, yeah, maybe go make macros. Maybe you come back and the macros aren't the thing. Maybe after 2 hours, you've been shooting macros and you've been having a blast, you've calmed down, you got into flow, and then you look up and you're like, oh my God, that's the shot.
Yeah.
Like it was there all the time. Or you turn around and you go, oh my God, the shot is, I've been here for an hour and I didn't see that.
John and I, John, we've had that. We when we do workshops together, we do 3 or 4 a year, and we'll take somebody to a group to a location, and we'll say, okay, we're going to be here for an hour and a half. And if you do everything you think that you want to do in the first 10 minutes, well, then that's your issue, but we're going to be here an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And we've had people, right, John, come up and say, there's 3 other places we could go. Why are we? And we tell them that it's part of what we're trying to teach you. Walk around, look around, and it'll happen, just like you said, David. So much better than I said it. But
but you're absolutely right. You need that time to become a more observant person in that space, and for things to happen, and for you to stop, screwing around with all your gear and settle. And I find it remarkable again that, we are more familiar with the B&H catalog than we are with our own psychology and our own ability just to, and we sit there and we're looking around like we get fidgety, and we do want to go, because we think in our minds like, oh, if I go to that other place, something amazing is going to be happening. No, it won't be. It'll be this, unless you miraculously show up at that moment at that other place where the light is great and the moment is happening, it's going to be the same. It's everywhere we go, we bring us with us, and we're the problem. And we're also the solution to that problem. We need to sit and slow. And I would rather spend way more time in one place. When I do workshops, I do a series in different places around the world, and I choose my locations based on, can I stay in that spot and never have to get on a bus, never have to go somewhere else? Because we walk and we will spend like a week in Venice. We don't go anywhere else. There's no, hey, we're going to go here. We're going to go. You wake up in the morning and you go do your work, and you're going to see the same place, same bridges, the same canals, the same thing over and over and over again, but you're going to see them in different light. You're going to see different characters moving across them. And that first day, you're going to get bored. You're like, oh, I've seen the place. No, you haven't. Wait till the last day, and you've got 12 images that thrill you. That comes from truly seeing a place. That's our job.
Guy Talon, when we did our Sierra, we do our workshop, and then after that we do another one, and we, for lack of a better term, called it a master class, theoretically, for more advanced photographers. And what we would typically do is we go back to the same location probably 3 times.
Sure. We
go once, come back and look at images, talk about them, go back again, and it was amazing. The difference. Some of them no better, no worse, but just different views, different stories. It's an amazing thing. So I'd encourage everybody to listen to what David's preaching here, and go sit in a rock for half a morning.
Yep. Let me just change real quick, David. And we touched on your books, your books real quickly, but there's one book that really resonates with me that I wanted to kind of share with the audience, and it's The Heart of the Photograph: 100 Questions for Making Stronger, More Expressive Photographs. Can you talk about that book a little bit, and what's the impetus for it, and what do you cover in that book? Because that's, I think, at the core of what a lot of people want to do when they want to find their voice, or they want to make better images. I think your book here speaks to a lot of those challenges.
Yeah, thank you. I started that, as I do almost everything in life, with a question, and that question that I needed to answer was, what do we respond to in a photograph? You know, we always, everyone talks about, oh, it's, you know, I want to make a good photograph in this scene. And I'm like, that's not enough. Like, it's a terrible, if you're asking what is a good, what does that mean? It's a moving target, and it's incredibly useless in terms of driving decisions. But if you can ask yourself, you know, what do I want this photograph to feel like? If you can, you know, and so when I was asking, like, what do we respond to in a photograph? It's not the histogram, because the viewers of our pictures aren't going to see that. It's generally not the sharpness, although once in a while sharpness is important. It's more, what is it? And so things like depth. You know, you ask a photographer to talk to me about visual depth, and they look at you like, you know, like you got two heads. Talk to me about your use of perspective. Talk to me about, and there are, I mean, I was misleading about the subject in the sub. Oh God, what's it called? You know, the subtitle, because there's way more than 100 questions. Like, those were just the start. It's asking yourself questions that don't have a yes no answer, and seeing where they go. So how could I, for example, how could I use contrast or juxtaposition in this photograph? How could I use scale? How could I use visual depth? How could I use color? How could I use story or mystery? Like, these are the things we respond to. We respond to mystery. Well, there's no mystery setting on your dial. You know, there's no, it's like time priority, aperture priority. Oh, M for mystery. You know, I don't think that's what it stands for. You know,
somebody's going to hear this, and the next Sony A10 will have a mystery button on it.
Hey, bring it on. You know, but then the question is, okay, but how do you create mystery? You know, everyone wants to obliterate shadows. They want 20 stops of dynamic range, and they want to get rid of their shadows. And I'm like, yeah, but you just eliminated the mood. And so on some level, we need to be asking, actually not on some level, like fundamentally, we need to be asking, what do we respond to in a photograph? Or how do we create mood? How do we, you know, this quote from David Allen Harvey, you know, this idea of don't shoot what it looks like, shoot what it feels like, which is great. It's a perfect soundbite, but how do you do that? These are the questions that I wanted to address in the heart of the photograph, because I think if you can figure out what your photograph's not of, right? Everyone knows what their picture's of. It's, you know, it's the mountains, it's the bird, it's the squirrel, whatever. But what is it about? Is it a certain mood? Is it a feeling? Is there a story within that image? And not every image, well, great photograph has to have a story. No, it doesn't. There's lots of beautiful, compelling photographs that aren't about story. But if it's about story, you better understand story. And I don't know that I've ever met a photographer that I can say, okay, so tell me what the elements of story are. Why do you think this? And again, it's like, I don't really know. We need to start knowing these things. We need to know what makes a good story. We need to know what, you know, makes mystery. How do you do that?
You know, and a story doesn't have to be, you know, a house. I mean, a story could be green.
Well, yeah, I would, yes, but I would say that's a theme for sure. I wouldn't say that's a story. Story is its own thing. But what the image is about, yeah, it could be a theme or an idea or a mood. It could 100%. It could just be about the greenness of it. What we need as photographers to understand these things, because it's very rare that most of us, even those of us who've been doing it for years and years and years, that we pick up the camera and have this moment of grace where it's like we look through the lens, everything's perfect, we press the button, we don't even need to take it to Lightroom, it's perfect straight out of the camera as a JPEG. That is so rare. Most of us grieve over it and say some bad words and change our angle and ask a lot of questions. Having a sense of what those better questions might be, I think, is really important. It guides us into better answers.
It does. And I think kind of the first question that you have written out here that kind of relates to what Jack's talking about is that big picture question of what do I want this image to accomplish? Oh my God, if we don't know
Exactly.
what we're doing, why we're taking this photograph, then why are we taking it?
I just want likes on Instagram.
Yeah,
That's it.
okay. That's
Just
fair.
likes on Instagram.
Well, as long as you can
we-
articulate what you're doing and why you're doing it, I'm all for it. I may not agree with it,
Sure.
but as long
Right.
as you're intentional about your photograph, that's great.
100%. But if you want likes on Instagram, you better at least have an understanding of what people respond to in a photograph, right? Like otherwise, and this is why I think it's so important that we understand the difference between what a picture is of and what a photograph is about. Because you can take any photograph in the world and point it at a bear and you've got a picture of a bear. But if it's about more, if it's about a certain feeling or a certain aspect of the bear, is it an angry bear? Is it a happy bear? Is it a bear in relationship to its cub? Well, that's what it's about. Then your optics are going to change. Your focal length will be different. Your perspective or point of view will be different. What you do in post-production, the final frame you choose in the edit also will be different. And this is not about overthinking it. Sometimes you just kind of trust your gut and kind of go with it. But I think at the beginning, you got to train your gut, because I know a lot of people whose guts, including my own, are full of crap. So if you don't train your instincts, if you don't at least start asking these questions, I don't know how you can make a meaningful photograph that is truly actually about something more than it is of, right? Because it doesn't take anything to point your camera. But beyond that, then when we start having to make decisions, then it's like, okay, but what an opportunity to be able to do. And you've all experienced this. You go to a workshop and you're standing side by side someone and you're making photographs, and later you look at his picture and you're like, where the heck did you take that?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even
the time.
see that, right? Yeah. And that's one of the magic things to me, is you can be in a place and both have completely different perceptions. And one person is like focused on the macro and the other shooting like a master landscape. There is so much opportunity for individuality in all of this stuff. I'm just suggesting that so there's no formula, but asking better questions gets us, because the core creative question is always, what if I do this? What if I do this? And as you combine that with, oh, but I like this better. Oh yeah, I like that, and you get closer and closer to something that's meaningful and is not just sharp and well exposed. Whether you get the likes on Instagram or not, that's another thing. But at least we're getting closer to if you respond to the thing in the photograph, if you respond to the mystery or the mood or the story, there's a good chance someone else out there is going to respond to it.
I'm sure that, and we won't name names here because I don't want to get into that, but and John can do it, you could do it, I could do it. Anybody who's been doing what we've been doing for as long as we've been doing it I can name you the workshop clients, and there aren't many of them, but there's a couple dozen who are not technically as advanced as some of the other people I've had. Man, their images are just so great because they're doing exactly what you just said. They're thinking just the way you just so greatly expressed it. I mean, they're not technical mavens, but they're creators.
No, and I would argue that I'm not a technical maven either. I know my craft. I know how to work the tools, but my God, you start talking about, I don't know. I hear photographers talking about like, what was the one I heard the other day? Focus breathing. And I just went, oh, you lost me. I'm sure somewhere out there, someone's going, what? Oh, yeah, like there's some nutty stuff out there, which in scientifically, technically, great, but you do not, there's actually a very minimal amount of skill you need to accomplish to make a photograph.
Well, of course.
Really, I mean, I started with a Pentax Spotmatic that had like, if you take away the self timer, it had like a dial for shutter. You could change the ISO. It had an aperture ring, and you could focus. There was from those, there was an infinite amount of creative decisions you could make. But it didn't take too long before you figured out how to expose your sensor, how to focus it. And then from there, it was like, okay, what can I do with these basic tools? My Sony A1, I don't even know how many buttons it has, but it's got like the menu. It's just, I don't know what half. I don't know what most of the menu items are. I just scroll through them and go, God, I hope someone at Sony knows what this is. Someone out there needs it, but I don't, you know?
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. It kind of, to summarize a little bit of this, it's that old sort of saying: are you a camera owner or an artist? Are you a photographer or an artist? And there's a difference between the two.
Huge, and a lot of people are not comfortable with the word artist, and I'm totally fine with that. But there is a question: do you know how to use a camera, or do you know how to make a photograph? Like, there's a lot of people that know everything about a guitar, but they know nothing about music itself, or what people respond to in a song. They don't even really have a sense of what their own voice is. These are different, very different things. One, I think, is fairly easily learned. It's maybe you're not ever going to master the guitar, but you know what? 3 chords and a truth, you can go a long way with that. And I would argue the same with the camera. You know, get the basics, but don't wait until you've mastered it. That point way down the road when you're like, I've got it all figured out. Now I'll start looking for my voice as a photographer. Now I'll start playing around with some of the creative possibilities. What a long way to go before you know, and I think if I could say anything, I mean, I'm a big fan of the amateurs. I'm so tired of people saying, oh, I'm not a real photographer because I'm not a pro. Look, no Olympic athlete has ever said, you know, I'm not a pro. Well, exactly. Exactly. And so if we can kind of avoid these labels, the thing that I most want for photographers is creative freedom. I want them to forget the labels. I want them to forget the obligation and what lens should I use for this. And I mean, so much of it. And then the rules, and just pick up the camera, figure out the basics, and go see what you can do with it. See what it can accomplish in your hands. Because what you do with it will be very different than what I do with it. And we need your voice. We need people out there going, this is how I see the world. Not try. No one needs another David duChemin. There's one. I am more than enough. Sometimes not you know, not enough. But I'm working through that.
You books, are you in the middle of anything new, or are you?
Yeah, I'm writing a new one. So I have kind of glommed onto this idea of light, space, and time, and I'm not sure if my publisher wants me to give it away, but yeah, my new book I'm working on is called Light, Space, and Time, and it's essays about creativity and camera craft. Just talking about, you know, what it takes to be. There's lots of books out there about creativity, but they're general. I want to kind of look at it from the perspective of a photographer and give photographers some encouragement and freedom to kind of wrestle with the creative stuff, and to know that you're not alone when you find it hard, because it is hard. It's not easy. By nature, creativity is, we are working in the unknown, because if you're working to just make the same photograph you've made before, you don't need creativity. You just need a formula. So yeah, and it will feature my wildlife work, which I haven't published in book form as I've sort of evolved as a photographer. So that's kind of my big effort right now, and just, you know, getting back on my feet, so to speak. That's the next big kind of challenge, I think.
And you're going to be doing some traveling.
Yeah, I've got a bear trip in September that I'm doing, so I'll spend a week with grizzly bears here in British Columbia, and end of September, beginning of October, and then another bit of a break to kind of, you know, fine tune things, and then in January I always spend a month in Kenya on safari, so I'll be there January, February, and then I'm not sure. I'll probably start photographing wolves here on Vancouver Island. There's a population of wolves that I'd like to photograph, and then it's time to get on a plane again. I you know, other than Kenya, I'd like to get back to Venice. I'm desperate to get back to, I like dusty adventures. I want to go back to India. I have an idea for a workshop where it's just one camera, one lens, and we go and photograph kind of more intimately in a small town in India. but yeah, I'm still trying to kind of figure that out. I need to get walking and feel like this is not going to be a, too big a challenge before I start actually booking flights. Because once you start doing that and you start taking deposits for trips and inviting people, there's no graceful way to back out of it.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But people can go to your website that you'll keep updated, and I would really. John and I get comments all the time like, well, you guys run workshops. Why are you telling people to take workshops with other people? And well, obviously, so they can learn. And I would strongly encourage people to spend some time with on David's website, read his blog. How this all happened, David, you didn't even know this. I forgot to tell you, but I had a dear friend send me an email the other morning about your latest article, and said, "Boy, you ought to read this from this guy." And he didn't know that we whether we know each other intimately or not, we all know about each other, and we all have some kind of synergy here, and that prompted me to call you and ask you to come on with us here today. And that article is, I think John will agree, is one of the formative pieces of writing. It's kind of you could read it in about 15 minutes, but read it 3 times.
Yeah,
there's a lot
it's foundational, I think.
Foundational
For all that
John,
we're trying to do.
come up with the right word. That's why I keep Peterson around. He comes up with the right words and runs a great podcast here.
So, folks, just because we'll start to slowly wrap this up, but just to reinforce what Jack said, please go out and visit David's website. Sign up for his newsletter, always full of great stuff. That comes out, once every couple of weeks, David, I think?
Yeah, it's normally, I say, every 2 weeks. Lately, with the amputation and stuff, I've been, I got so many people pulling for me that I've had a few more regular updates. But if you go to, you certainly go to my website, davidduchemin.com. From there, you can see my work and that sort of thing.
We'll put up a show notes here on our so people can click and get there.
Most people find, because nobody goes to blogs anymore. I mean, you got to remember to go see it. And so if you go to my contact sheet, the contact sheet is what I call my email. If you go to mycontactsheet.com, there's an easy way just to sign up. Of course, you can always unsubscribe. But that's my, everyone's got a newsletter. I don't have a newsletter. I send out a significant, I hope, a significant piece of writing that will make people's lives better, that will help them think in stronger ways as photographers and creative human beings. Yes, I also put it on the blog, but if you just want it delivered straight to your inbox every 2 weeks, and then of course I almost never advertise my workshops, my courses. That always goes through email. So if you want to be first to know about those opportunities, I would absolutely welcome you to join mycontactsheet.com, and I'll start sending it to you.
Outstanding.
Well, David, be first, thank you for being here.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for your inspiration. And and I'm not just saying this because David's here, but I have read the books, and there are a few people, maybe a dozen photographers that I have been inspired by, and David is right up there. I still think we ought to try to get a bunch of us on, maybe get on you and Guy and Michael and a few of us who have this passion to teach creativity, if it can be done. It's just so important. But thank you for being here, John. Anything that I'm leaving out here?
No, nothing else. Just a call out for those folks listening. We're still doing our image critiques every now and again. So if you have any images you would like to submit to us, send it to wetalkphoto@gmail.com. We'll get them up on the next YouTube image critique that we do.
And we've
So
got
with
to
that,
get
David, thank you. It's
back.
been a pleasure. I mean, I could talk about creativity and all of this stuff for hours, but
We'll
too.
get David back.
yeah, we'll get you
I
back.
can't believe the time went so fast. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well,
So-
you when the time is right, you guys give me a call. I'd love to be back again.
We'll be there. David, we're gonna
Fantastic.
sign off here. Don't you leave.
Okay.
When we start off, we'll say goodbye. Anyhow, folks, thank you again. WeTalkPhoto.com at Gmail. And until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.